People often imagine that the loneliest roads are the ones stretching through forests or mountains. They picture endless pines, abandoned villages, or mist rolling across forgotten valleys. But they are wrong. The loneliest road I have ever known was surrounded by streetlights. It was wrote Dick Sept. Every Thursday night, the same old coach left the central station in northern England just before midnight, carrying exhausted workers, university students returning home, elderly couples visiting family, and the occasional tourist who had chosen the cheapest ticket without asking why it was so. Inexpensive. I had been driving that route for almost 12 years. By then I could have driven it blindfolded. Every bend, every petrol station, every bridge crossing the river, every lonely bus stop where only one passenger waited beneath a flickering lamp. Driving became less like work and more like breathing. You stopped noticing it, until something happened that made every familiar mile feel completely different. My name is Lucas Carter. Before I became a coach driver, I believed life moved forward like roads always do. One direction, no turning back. Then my little boy died. Oliver was only 8. A drunk driver ignored a red light one rainy afternoon. My wife Hannah survived the crash with a broken shoulder. Oliver never woke up. People say grief arrives like a storm. They lie. Storms eventually pass. Grief moves into your house. It sits beside you while you eat. It sleeps beside you at night. It watches television with you. And eventually you stop asking it to leave. Hannah tried to save us. She suggested therapy, weekend trips, long walks along the coast, birthday traditions, Christmas traditions, anything. I agreed to everything while secretly feeling nothing. The worst part wasn't crying. It was discovering I couldn't cry anymore. I simply became quiet. Driving buses suited that version of me. Passengers entered. Passengers left. Nobody expected conversation. Nobody asked why my wedding ring remained on my finger, even though my wife and I barely spoke anymore. Nobody noticed how often I stared at empty playgrounds whenever the traffic lights turned red. Silence became easier than living. That Thursday in October began like every other shift. Cold rain covered the station windows. The departure board flickered with delays. The smell of diesel mixed with fresh coffee drifting from a nearby cafe. I completed my safety inspection. Checked the tires, checked the mirrors, signed the paperwork. The dispatcher handed me the manifest. Quiet night, he said. Looks that way. Only 12 passengers. Fine by me. He smiled sympathetically. Everyone at the depot knew about Oliver. Nobody mentioned him anymore. Sometimes kindness is simply knowing when not to speak. Passengers slowly boarded. A young businessman wearing expensive headphones. An elderly woman knitting something blue. 2 university students arguing over football. A nurse already asleep before we even departed. Seat after seat filled. Everything felt ordinary. At exactly 1:15 p.m., I closed the luggage compartment, 1 minute before departure. Then I noticed someone standing across the street. A young woman. She wore a dark green coat that looked slightly too large for her. Long auburn hair rested across one shoulder. She carried no suitcase, no handbag. Only a small, leather-bound notebook pressed against her chest. She wasn't running. She wasn't waving. She simply stood beneath the street lamp, watching the bus, almost as though she had been waiting for me. The station clock reached midnight. I sighed. Late passengers usually meant delayed schedules. I opened the door again. She crossed the road slowly. Every step seemed strangely deliberate. When she climbed aboard, something immediately felt different. Not frightening, just quiet. The usual sounds disappeared. The chatter, the coughs, the rustling newspapers. Even the rain outside suddenly seemed distant. She smiled politely. Good evening. Her voice carried the soft elegance of someone educated somewhere old. Perhaps Oxford, perhaps Edinburgh. It reminded me of stories my grandmother used to read aloud. Evening, I replied. Destination, the last stop. I looked at the ticket machine. That'll be 21 pounds. She tilted her head. I already have one. She handed me a paper ticket. Not electronic, paper, perfectly clean, perfectly folded. The strange thing wasn't the ticket itself. It was the date, issued exactly 1 year earlier. I frowned. This ticket is old. She smiled again. I know. It shouldn't scan. It never does. I tried anyway. The machine beeped once. Green light. Accepted. I blinked. That's unusual. It usually is. She thanked me and quietly walked toward the rear of the coach. Seat 17. Window side. She looked outside before the bus had even begun moving. As though she already knew every mile ahead, I closed the door, pulled away from the station. The journey began. For nearly 40 minutes, nothing happened. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. The engine hummed beneath my feet. Passengers slept. Traffic faded behind us. Everything returned to normal. Almost. Except I kept checking the mirror. Not intentionally. My eyes simply drifted towards seat 17. She never moved. Never looked at her phone. Never adjusted her coat. Never yawned. She simply watched the darkness beyond the glass. Around 1, 2, 4, 5 a.m., I announced our first scheduled stop. 3 passengers exited. No one boarded. When I closed the doors again, I happened to glance into the mirror. She was looking directly at me. Not through me. At me. She smiled gently. Not flirtatiously. Not awkwardly. Almost. Compassionately. As if she knew something about me. The feeling lingered long after I looked away. By 1:30 fog began creeping over the countryside. Visibility dropped. Streetlights became pale golden circles floating inside endless white. I slowed the coach. Years of experience taught me never to challenge fog. It always wins. Then I heard footsteps. Soft. Measured. Someone walking toward the driver's seat. I glanced into the mirror. The young woman. She stopped beside me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to disturb you." "That's all right." "You look tired." I laughed quietly. "Occupational hazard." "No." She looked at me with remarkable sadness. Deeply tired. Something tightened inside my chest. Most people noticed the wrinkles. The gray hair. Nobody noticed exhaustion anymore. "You've been carrying something very heavy." I kept my eyes on the road. "I suppose everyone has." She remained silent for several seconds, then asked, "Do you miss him every day?" My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I hadn't mentioned Oliver. There was no photograph visible, no conversation, nothing. My heartbeat quickened. "What did you say?" "The little boy." Cold spread through my arms. "How do you know about him?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. Who are you?" Instead of answering, she looked through the windshield toward the endless fog. "The road ahead is dangerous tonight." I felt irritation replacing fear. "Listen, if this is some kind of joke, it isn't." Her voice remained calm. "When we reach Blackstone Bridge," she paused. "Please drive slowly." I stared at her. "I always do." "I know." Then she smiled once more. "Thank you." Without another word, she quietly returned to seat 17. The remainder of the journey felt impossibly long. Every few minutes I checked the mirror. She remained there, watching the night, watching the rain, watching something only she could see. At exactly 2:06 a.m., Blackstone Bridge appeared through the fog. An old stone bridge crossing a narrow river, beautiful during daylight, treacherous after midnight. Her words echoed inside my head. "Please drive slowly." I eased off the accelerator. Barely 30 seconds later, 2 enormous deer burst from the fog directly onto the road. I slammed the brakes. Passengers screamed. The coach skidded violently before stopping only inches from the bridge's stone barrier. Silence. Absolute silence. My breathing sounded louder than the engine. One deer disappeared into the darkness. The other stood staring at the bus for several long seconds before slowly walking away. Had I been driving only 10 kilometers faster, the coach would have gone straight through the barrier. I swallowed hard. The passengers slowly settled down. Someone cursed. Someone laughed nervously. I looked into the rearview mirror. Seat 17. The young woman wasn't frightened. She simply looked out the window, as though she had expected every second of it. For several seconds after the coach stopped, nobody spoke. The engine idled with a low, wounded groan beneath the floor. Rain continued to whisper against the windshield, soft and indifferent, as if it had not just watched 12 people come within inches of death. The fog pressed against the windows so thickly that the world beyond the glass seemed to have disappeared entirely. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. Behind me, passengers began to stir. "Bloody hell," one of the university boys muttered. The elderly woman dropped her knitting onto the aisle and crossed herself with trembling fingers. The nurse, who had been asleep since the station, sat upright with wide, frightened eyes and asked if we had crashed. "No," I said, though my voice sounded far away from me. "Everyone stay seated. We're all right." But we weren't all right, not me. My heart was beating so hard I felt it in my throat. I looked again into the rearview mirror. Seat 17. The young woman sat perfectly still, her face turned toward the window. The faint reflection of the emergency lights painted her skin in pale red flashes. She did not look relieved. She did not look afraid. She looked mournful, as if this had happened before. I engaged the handbrake, took a slow breath, and forced myself to check on the passengers. Years of training returned to me through the panic. "Is anyone injured?" A few shaken voices answered no. One man complained that his shoulder hurt from the seatbelt. The elderly woman said she felt dizzy. I stood, walked down the aisle, and checked them one by one. Their fear was ordinary, human, understandable. Hers was different. When I reached seat 17, she finally looked up at me. "Thank you," she said. I stared at her. "You knew." She lowered her eyes to the notebook in her lap. "You listened. Who are you?" She traced one finger along the edge of the notebook, as if the answer was written there, and she was afraid to read it aloud. "My name is Clara." "Clara what?" She smiled sadly. "That part doesn't matter yet." "Yes, it does." A few passengers turned to look at us. I realized my voice had grown too sharp. I leaned closer and whispered, "You told me to slow down at this exact bridge. Then two deer came out of nowhere. You asked about my son. You boarded with a ticket from last year, and the machine accepted it, so don't tell me it doesn't matter." Clara held my gaze. Her eyes were gray. Not blue, not green. Gray like winter seawater beneath a cloudy sky. "I didn't come here to frighten you, Mr. Carter." Hearing my name from her mouth made something cold settle in my chest. "I never told you my name." "No," she said gently. "You didn't." I stepped back. The coach suddenly felt too small. The fog outside too close. I wanted to demand answers, but the other passengers were watching now, and I still had a job to do. I returned to the driver's seat, radioed the incident to dispatch, and told them we were safe, but would be delayed. They asked if I needed emergency assistance. I looked at the bridge, at the broken mist, at the place where the coach would have gone through the stone wall if I had been going faster. "No," I said after a moment. "No injuries. We'll continue shortly." Dispatch told me to take it slowly. I almost laughed. Slowly. Yes, I could do that. When I pulled away from Blackstone Bridge, nobody complained about the delay. The passengers were too quiet for that. Fear has a way of making strangers polite. The two university boys no longer argued about football. The businessman had removed his headphones. The elderly woman clutched her knitting as though it were a rosary. And Clara remained in seat 17, watching the road, watching me. The next stop was Harrogate Cross, a little station beside an old church and 3 shuttered shops. We arrived at 2:31 a.m., 20 minutes late. The businessman got off there. So did the nurse. I watched them hurry into the rain, each glancing back at the coach as if afraid the vehicle itself had become cursed. When I closed the door, Clara stood again. She walked forward, silent and graceful despite the motion of the bus. "You should call your wife," she said. I kept my eyes on the mirror. "My personal life isn't your concern." "She is awake." My throat tightened. "What? Hannah is awake. She is sitting at the kitchen table. There is a cup of tea in front of her, but she hasn't touched it." I felt my foot lift from the accelerator slightly. "Stop. She has your son's blue jumper folded beside her. Stop talking. She does that when she misses both of you." I pulled the coach sharply to the side of the empty road. The passengers jolted. Someone swore. I turned in my seat. "How do you know that Clara did not flinch?" "I'm sorry." "No. You don't get to say sorry and then keep speaking like you've been standing inside my house." Her face changed then. For the first time, I saw pain pass across it. Not fear. Pain. The kind of pain I recognized because I carried it every day. "I know what it is to leave someone waiting," she whispered. The anger inside me faltered. Outside, the fog moved slowly past the windows, like breath over glass. I should have ordered her back to her seat. I should have called the police. I should have refused to drive another meter until she told me who she was. Instead, I took out my phone. My thumb hovered above Hannah's name. We had not spoken properly in weeks. Not really. We exchanged necessary words. Bills. Appointments. Groceries. Silences. But Clara watched me with such quiet certainty that I pressed call before I could change my mind. It rang 4 times. Then Hannah answered. Lucas. Her voice was small, sleepy but not asleep. I closed my eyes. Are you awake? A pause. Yes. Are you at the kitchen table? Another pause. Longer. How did you know? I looked at Clara. She was turned away now, facing the rain-dark window. I just felt like calling. Hannah breathed shakily. I couldn't sleep. Is Oliver's jumper with you? This time she said nothing, but I heard it. A tiny broken sound. The sound of someone trying not to cry. Lucas, she whispered. Why are you asking me that? My chest hurt. It had hurt every day for years, but this was different. This pain had movement in it. It was not the dead stone I had carried inside me since Oliver died. It was something breaking open. I don't know, I said honestly. For a while, neither of us spoke. The passengers behind me waited in silence, perhaps sensing that something private and fragile was happening at the front of that old midnight coach. Then Hannah said, I miss you. I pressed my hand over my eyes. I know. No, she whispered. I miss you. Not just Oliver. You. Those words nearly destroyed me, because the truth was, I had allowed myself to become another ghost in her house. A breathing ghost. A working ghost. A man who came home, removed his shoes, sat in the same chair, and disappeared while still being visible. I miss you too, I said. It was the first honest thing I had told her in months. Maybe years. I'll be home in the morning, I added. Will you? The question was quiet, but I understood what she meant. She was not asking whether the bus route ended. She was asking whether I would truly come home. I looked at the empty road ahead, then at Clara. Yes, I said. I will. When I ended the call, my hands were shaking. Clara returned slowly to her seat without another word. I drove on. The night deepened. By 3 o'clock, only 5 passengers remained. The elderly woman, the 2 university boys, a man in a brown coat who had boarded silently at the first station, and Clara. The fog thinned as we entered open countryside. Moonlight appeared faintly behind the clouds, turning wet fields silver. Stone walls rolled alongside the road. Bare trees reached upward like black hands. I tried to focus, but my mind was no longer on the road alone. It was on Hannah sitting at that kitchen table, on Oliver's blue jumper, on all the years I had mistaken survival for loyalty. Then, the interior lights flickered. Once, twice. The university boys looked up. Power issue 1 asked. Nothing to worry about, I said automatically. But something was wrong. The dashboard clock changed. 307, then 207, then 107, then blank. A chill swept through the coach. Not from outside, from within. The windows began to fog from the inside, though the heaters were running normally. In the mirror, Clara was standing again. This time, she was not looking at me. She was looking at the man in the brown coat. He sat near the middle of the coach head, lowered gloved hands resting on his knees. I had almost forgotten he was there. Clara walked toward him slowly. The sound of her footsteps seemed louder than the engine. She stopped beside his seat. You shouldn't be here, she said. The man did not move. The elderly woman whispered something under her breath. I kept one eye on the road and one on the mirror. Miss, I called, please sit down. Clara ignored me. The man in the brown coat lifted his head. I could not see his face clearly, only the pale line of his mouth beneath the brim of his hat. When he spoke, his voice was dry and low. Neither should you. The coach seemed to lurch, though. The road was straight. My stomach dropped. The university boys fell silent. Clara gripped the seat beside her. You have to get off, she said. The man smiled. Not yet. Those 2 words moved through the coach like ice water. Not yet. The same words from the outline of my nightmare. The same feeling I had sensed from Clara since midnight. I glanced ahead and saw a bus stop emerging from the mist. There was no village nearby. No houses. No street lamps except one old iron post leaning over a cracked pavement. The sign was half broken, but I knew the place. Every driver on Route 17 knew it. Renlow Hollow, an abandoned stop. No one used it anymore. No one had used it for years. I slowed without meaning to. The doors hissed open. Cold air entered. The man in the brown coat stood. He moved down the aisle with terrible slowness. As he passed Clara, he whispered something I could not hear. Her face turned white. Then he stepped off the coach into the fog. For 1 second, I saw him beneath the leaning lamp. Then the light flickered, and he was gone. The doors closed by themselves. I hadn't touched the control. Behind me, one of the university boys began to pray. The elderly woman started crying softly. I looked at Clara through the mirror. "What was that?" I asked. She did not answer. Clara. She walked to the front of the coach and stood beside me, her hands clenched around the notebook. "The road remembers things," she whispered. I almost laughed from pure fear. "What does that mean?" "It means some journeys don't end just because the passengers die." My mouth went dry. The coach continued forward, though. I could barely feel my hands. Clara opened her notebook. The pages were filled with names. Dozens of them, written in careful, elegant handwriting. Some names had dates beside them. Some had small crosses. Near the bottom of one page, I saw a name that made my breathing stop. Lucas Carter. My name, written in black ink. Beside it was tonight's date, and beside the date, one unfinished sentence. He must reach the last stop before dawn, or he will follow the wrong passenger home. For a moment, the road vanished. Not because of the fog, not because of the rain, because when I saw my own name written inside Clara's notebook, something inside me stepped away from the present and stood somewhere colder. Lucas Carter. Tonight's date. He must reach the last stop before dawn, or he will follow the wrong passenger home. I wanted to ask what it meant. I wanted to shout at her to tear the notebook from her hands, to force the night to become ordinary again. But no sound came out of me. The coach rolled forward through the empty countryside. Behind us, Renlow Hollow had disappeared into the mist, taking the man in the brown coat with it. The passengers who remained were silent now. Not the uneasy silence after a near accident. This was different. This was the silence of people who had begun to understand that fear could have rules, and none of us knew them. Clara closed the notebook slowly. "I wasn't supposed to show you that. You wrote my name." "No." Her voice trembled. "I found it there." I looked at her reflection in the windshield. She stood beside my seat, pale as moonlight, her hands wrapped around that old leather book like it was the only thing holding her together. "What happens at dawn?" She swallowed. "The road chooses." "The road chooses what? Who goes home?" The elderly woman began to sob softly behind us. One of the university boys whispered, "This isn't real." Clara turned to them with unexpected tenderness. "It is real, but it isn't for all of you. Stay in your seats. Do not answer if anyone outside calls your name. Do not get off before your stop. And whatever you see through the windows," she paused, "do not open them." The lights flickered again. This time they did not return fully. They glowed dim and yellow like candles trapped beneath dirty glass. I forced myself to breathe and kept driving. "Tell me who you are," I said. Clara stared ahead. My full name was Clara Whitmore. Was. The word landed harder than any scream. I was 19 when I boarded Route 17. It was raining then, too. I had argued with my mother before leaving home. Something foolish. Something cruel. The kind of thing young people say because they believe there will always be another morning to apologize. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. I was going to my sister's house, seat 17, window side. I remember being angry. I remember pretending not to cry. Then near Blackstone Bridge, the driver was going too fast. The windshield wipers swept across the glass. Once, twice. The coach went through the barrier. My stomach turned cold. Everyone died. "No," Clara whispered. "Not everyone. Some survived the crash. But the driver didn't. Neither did I." The road ahead curved between two black rows of trees. I slowed carefully. "My ticket," she continued, kept bringing me back. "Not every night. Only certain nights. Nights when the road grows hungry. Nights when someone on Route 17 is close enough to grief that they might mistake death for rest." I understood then. The brown-coated man. His words. "Not yet." "He came for me?" I asked. Clara looked at me. "No. He came because of you." My throat closed. The thought was obscene and yet familiar. Hadn't I imagined it countless times, not dramatically, not with ropes or pills or blades, just quiet surrender, a car left running, a road taken too fast, a bridge not respected, an accident that would look like sleep and rain and poor visibility. I had never told anyone, not Hannah, not a doctor, not even myself properly, but grief knows the doors we leave unlocked. He's not a person, is he? I asked. Clara shook her head. He's every ending that pretends to be peace. The final stop was 26 miles away. Dawn was beginning somewhere beyond the clouds, but inside the coach, the night refused to thin. The dashboard clock returned. 4:11 a.m. Then 4:12. Then 3:07. Then blank again. How much time do we have? I asked. Clara looked toward the east. Less than you think. The road began to change. At first I thought we had taken a wrong turn, but Route 17 was straight here. There should have been fields on either side, a row of cottages, then the old petrol station with the red sign. Instead, the coach passed a playground. I knew that playground. My hands froze. A small roundabout stood beneath a sycamore tree. Wet swings moved gently in the rain, though there was no wind. A blue plastic slide shone beneath the street lamp. Oliver's playground. It was miles from this road, and years from this night. From somewhere outside, a child's voice called Dad. Every part of me broke at once. The coach drifted toward the curb. Clara grabbed my arm. Don't stop. I stared through the windshield. A little boy stood beside the swings in blue pajamas, his hair damp from rain, his face half hidden by shadow. Dad, I'm cold. The passengers behind me began crying. The voice was Oliver's. Not similar. Not almost. His. Dad, why didn't you come? My foot moved toward the brake. Clara's grip tightened with impossible strength. Lucas, listen to me. That is not your son. You don't know that. I know exactly what grief sounds like when it lies. The boy stepped closer to the road. Dad, please. I could not breathe. For 3 years I had imagined what I would do if I heard Oliver again. I had prayed for it, cursed God for denying it, dreamed it and woken with my pillow wet beneath my face. And now there he was. Small. Cold. Waiting. I have to. No, Clara said, and her voice broke. If you stop, you won't go to him. He will come back with you, and he will wear your son's voice forever. Tears blurred the road. The boy lifted one hand. I saw the bracelet Hannah had made him. Blue thread. Tiny silver star. Tell me something only Oliver would know, I whispered. Clara leaned close. No. That's how it gets in. Drive. The playground slid past the windows. The boy ran beside the coach. For one terrible second, his small palms slapped against the glass near my side. Dad, I screamed. Not from fear. From love. From the cruelty of being alive. I pressed the accelerator. The coach surged forward, leaving the playground behind. The sound of Oliver's voice faded into the rain, and when I looked in the mirror, there was nothing behind us but fog. I was crying openly now. I did not try to hide it. Neither did Clara. Does it ever stop? I asked. No, she said softly. But it changes if you let someone carry it with you. Hannah. Her name came into my mind like a candle lit in a dark church. Hannah, sitting at the kitchen table. Hannah folding Oliver's jumper. Hannah waiting for a husband who had mistaken silence for strength. I drove. The road fought us. It showed the elderly woman a man standing at a cottage gate calling her name. She shut her eyes and prayed until he disappeared. It showed one university boy his dead brother waving from a lay-by. It showed the other, a version of himself lying pale and still beside a wrecked motorbike. Each time Clara warned them. Each time they resisted, and each mile became harder. The coach engine strained as if climbing a mountain, though the road was level. Frost formed along the inside of the windows. The lights dimmed until I could barely see the aisle. At 4:47 the brown-coated man appeared again. This time he stood in the road. I slammed the brakes. The coach stopped 10 feet from him. He did not move. His hat shadowed his face, but I could feel him smiling. Clara stepped into the aisle. You can't take him. The man's voice entered the coach without the doors opening. He wants to come. No, she said. He has wanted it for years. Every word struck me, because every word was true. The man raised one gloved hand and pointed at me. Ask him. Clara turned. Lucas. The entire coach waited. Rain slid down the windshield. My hands shook. I thought of Oliver in the hospital. Hannah screaming into my coat. The tiny coffin. The smell of lilies. The untouched bedroom. The years after, where every morning felt like a punishment for waking. Then I thought of Hannah's voice on the phone. I miss you. Not just Oliver. You. I did want it, I said. The brown-coated man tilted his head. Clara's eyes filled with fear. But I don't want it tonight. The man lowered his hand. I don't believe you. I took my phone from the console. No signal. Of course. Still, I opened Hannah's contact. Her photograph appeared on the screen. It was old. Taken before the accident. She was laughing at something Oliver had said off camera. I pressed the phone to my chest. I am going home to my wife. The brown-coated man stepped closer. The headlights flickered. Grief will still be there. I know. You will still wake up and remember. I know. You will still miss him. My voice broke. I know. Then why keep driving? I looked at Clara, at the passengers, at the pale suggestion of dawn beginning beyond the fog, because love doesn't end just because the road does. For the first time, Clara smiled through her tears. The brown-coated man screamed. It was not a human sound. The windows shook. The coach rocked violently. The elderly woman cried out. One of the boys fell into the aisle. The man rushed toward the windshield. I drove straight at him. For a split second, his face filled the glass. There was nothing beneath the hat, only darkness shaped like hunger. Then the coach passed through him. The world went white. When my vision returned, Route 17 was normal, real, wet fields, gray sky, a thin line of dawn over the hills. The dashboard clock read 5:16 a.m. The final stop appeared ahead, a small station at the edge of a coastal town where gulls circled above slate rooftops, and the morning smelled faintly of salt and rain. I pulled in slowly. The brakes sighed. Nobody moved. Then the doors opened. The elderly woman stood first. She touched my shoulder as she passed. "Go home, love," she whispered. The two university boys followed, pale and silent, no longer boys in the way they had been at midnight. The last ordinary passenger stepped off without a word. Only Clara remained. Seat 17. Window side. I turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt holy. "What happens to you now?" I asked. She looked down at the notebook. On the open page, my name had changed. The sentence beside it now read, "He reached the last stop before dawn." Below it, a new line appeared in faint ink. "Clara Whitmore may go home." Her lips trembled. "I think," she whispered, "I think I finally remember the way." The first sunlight touched the windows. For a moment, she looked 19, frightened and brave and unbearably sad. "Lucas," she said, "when you see your wife, don't only tell her you love her." "What should I tell her?" "Tell her you're still here." Then she stepped down from the coach. On the pavement stood a woman in an old wool coat, silver-haired and weeping. She opened her arms. Clara covered her mouth. "Mum." The woman nodded, and Clara ran to her. The sunlight brightened. Both of them faded like breath from glass. I sat alone in the driver's seat until the station staff came knocking. They found me crying. I did not explain. I drove back to the depot in silence, handed in my keys, and went home. Hannah was still at the kitchen table. Oliver's blue jumper lay folded beside her. When she saw my face, she stood slowly. I crossed the room and held her like a man coming back from the dead. "I'm here," I whispered. She broke in my arms. So did I. And for the first time since our son died, we cried together instead of separately. I never drove Route 17 again. But every year on the same October night, a ticket appears at the depot. Paper. Perfectly clean. Perfectly folded. Seat 17. No driver ever admits to placing it there. And no one throws it away.